at risk. We're really glad that you could join us today. During this session, we'll give a brief overview of eligibility for this grant program. We're going to show you how to start an application and provide an overview of what's asked. And we'll share a few final tips. We'll then turn to the questions. And I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Sharon Burney, and I'm joined today by my fellow program officer, Allison Pope, along with a few of our colleagues, Louise Quasgrove and Krista Williford. And we want to also thank our colleague, Erin O'Donnell, for assisting us with logistics. We'd like to begin with a few brief introductions to this platform, to CLIR as an organization, and to our team. And I'll turn it over to Allison.
Hi all, first the platform. Though many of us are old pros at Zoom by now, we want to provide a few reminders. Attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, you're welcome to use chat for general introductions and conversation. If a chat box isn't already displaying on your Zoom screen, you can hover your mouse toward the bottom of the screen and open it manually. In order to send a message to everyone, remember to change the default from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. We ask that you use the separate Q&A box to ask questions. This can be opened the same way as the chat box, and you can submit questions at any point during the webinar. We'll have dedicated time to answer them at the end. Because we have limited time together, please feel free to follow along with questions as they come in and upvote them to let us know that it would be helpful for you to have them answered live. And finally, the session recording and transcript will be made available on the Manage and Award page of our website following the event. We always like to start with CLIR's mission. We are an independent nonprofit organization that forges strategies to enhance research, teaching, and learning environments in collaboration with libraries, cultural institutions, and communities of higher learning. Our work is varied and includes programs which are staffed and supported by the organization. On this slide, we've highlighted DLF, the Leading Change Institute, and the regranting programs that we oversee. We also serve as the fiscal or administrative host for a number of affiliates, including IIIF, NDSA, Open Repositories, and Code for Lib, among others. This constellation of initiatives that we have the privilege to work among contribute to our understanding of the cultural heritage sector in myriad ways and inform our programs continually. Recordings at Risk is just one of many initiatives administered by CLIR. Although we're talking about a funding opportunity today, it's important to note that CLIR is not actually a funding agency. For the Recordings at Risk program, we receive generous funding through the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and CLIR acts as the regranting agency. Just as we receive proposals and reports from institutions, we also send proposals and reports to Mellon and other funding organizations. As a note, this is our first cycle of guaranteed funding. We have 3 cycles through our current parent grant. And we are currently in conversation with the Mellon Foundation about the future of our other regranting program, Digitizing Hidden Collections. Our work is accomplished by a relatively small staff of about 18 geographically distributed individuals, with the greatest concentration living in the DC area. The grants team is made up of me and Sharon and supervised by Louisa. Together, we administer our 2 active regranting programs from application to final report.
Before we move into our program content, we would like to center today's conversation by acknowledging that as residents of the U.S., we are speaking to you from unceded land of many indigenous peoples. We recognize the longstanding history that has brought us to reside on this land, and we seek to have greater understanding of our place within that colonial history. We denounce any acts of terrorism, colonialism, and environmental disregard, both past and present. In particular, we would like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize the original and current caretakers of the land, water, and air where we live, all Indigenous peoples and all of their ancestors and descendants. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on their homelands, and I ask you to join me in acknowledging all Indigenous communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. May this acknowledgement and our ongoing work demonstrate CLIR's commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. If you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to invite you to introduce yourself in the chat and share a land acknowledgement for the area where you live, only if you'd like to. For more than 20 years, CLIR has partnered with organizations to help raise awareness about the legal and practical threats to audio and audiovisual content. We supported the creation of the Library of Congress National Recording Preservation Plan in 2012 and gained valuable experience in regranting through our flagship Cataloging and Digitizing Hidden Special Collections and Archives program. In 2015, we collaborated with the ARSC Guide to Audio Preservation, which is a practical introduction to caring for and preserving audio collections and available as a free PDF download on our website. Through our work on these projects, CLIR came to recognize that there are unique challenges facing those performing audio and audio digitization and description. The first and biggest of these is that much AV content is at high risk of being lost due to physical degradation and changing environmental conditions. As materials disappear, cultural history does too. And so a second major challenge is that specialized training is often necessary to address description, storage, and maintenance needs for these materials, which staff may not possess. Third, storage costs post-digitization can be prohibitive. Organizations may not have the existing digital infrastructure to store and maintain preservation copies, production copies, and access copies of the materials. And a final challenge that CLIR recognized was the often tricky intellectual property situations surrounding these AV content. So all of the projects that have been funded through Recordings at Risk have had to work through some, if not all, of these challenges. Though through the program, CLIR aims to help organizations identify priorities for digital reformatting, build relationships with partners, raise awareness of best practices, and develop practical strategies for addressing all of them. To date, CLIR has completed 9 award cycles for RAR funding, a total of 147 projects involving more than 125 unique institutions and awarding over $4.5 million. In light of the many challenges unique to AV collections, the Recordings at Risk program was developed with 4 primary assessment criteria: impact, urgency, potential for preservation, and approach to access. These are different from our sibling regranting program, Digitizing Hidden Collections, as the emphasis for Recordings at Risk is grounded in the need for preservation through digitization and the recognition that materials will have varying levels of appropriate access, given the legal and ethical concerns. Recordings at Risk awards are smaller with shorter timelines and have a very narrow focus on the activities directly related to digitization work. With that, Allison will then move into the eligibility requirements for the program and the resources that are available to applicants.
Thanks, Sharon. We have provided all the information applicants should need on the Recordings at Risk program pages. In particular, the program's homepage and the Apply for an Award page. We'll share these links throughout the presentation and also point to specific resources available. We'll start with eligibility. To be considered for funding, you must be a U.S. nonprofit, academic, research, or cultural memory organization. The organization and its collections must also be located within the United States or a related entity, such as Puerto Rico or American Samoa. Government units and their agencies are eligible so long as their primary function is cultural heritage. And federally recognized tribal governments are also eligible. If you have any questions about whether or not your organization is eligible for a grant, you can always contact us via our program email at recordingsatrisk@clir.org. An eligible organization can only submit one application per cycle. If an organization submits more than one proposal, CLIR will contact the responsible parties and ask them to select just one for consideration. A common question we receive concerns different campuses of a single academic entity. For the purpose of this program, we treat each individual campus of a university system as its own distinct institution. For example, UC Berkeley and UC Riverside may submit separate applications and would not be required to join forces through a single University of California application. However, one of these universities would not be able to submit two applications from different schools or departments within the institution, such as one from the School of Law and one from the School of Engineering, or one from a campus library and one from a campus museum. Similar distinctions apply for national libraries and archives. Recordings at Risk does not have an official list of allowed or disallowed formats. We welcome applications as long as the format is audio and or visual, is time-based in nature, so no still photographs or slides, and you can find a qualified external service provider or vendor that can perform digital reformatting in an appropriate way for the format and condition of the physical materials. It is important to note that the program was designed with analog to digital reformatting projects in mind. While born digital AV content is no less important and is surely at risk, it is not the focus of this particular program at this moment. There are, of course, a few formats that blur the lines when it comes to the analog digital distinction, such as digital audio tape or DATs. This particular format, for instance, is eligible and certainly at risk. Files on a hard drive, however, in need of digital reformatting are not eligible. Don't hesitate to reach out to us to double check the eligibility of a specific format. Our timeline for Cycle 10 began on January 17, 2023, when the call for proposals opened. Proposals are due on April 19, 2023. Recipients will be announced in early August. We always notify applicants individually before the public announcement is made. All projects must last between 3 and 12 months. For Cycle 10, all project work should take place between September 1, 2023 and August 31, 2024. There are 2 additional recordings at risk cycles currently planned. Cycles 11 and 12 will open in early 2024 and 2025, respectively. The Apply for an Award page has a wealth of information to assist your grant writing process. Of particular note are the template budget documents, FAQs, and a number of sample applications that may help you inspire your proposal. We are regularly reviewing the resources we provide and often update these in response to common questions or issues we see. Sharon?
Thank you, Allison. Perhaps the most important resource on this page is the application guidelines and template. This is a single document providing step-by-step application instructions, explanation, and space for drafting responses. You can access it by clicking the View Guidelines at the top of the page. We've shared a screenshot of the first page of that document. The guidelines and template can be thought of as a handbook for this application, identifying how the questions will be asked in the online application system and providing additional explanation, instructions, and the underlying rationale for the various components of the proposal. Some of what is covered in the guidelines will be mentioned here in the webinar and on the application form itself, but always reference the guidelines for a more comprehensive explanation of the application questions and requirements. This is available as a Google Doc you can copy in order to develop your proposal alongside your team. You can also download the document as a Word document or PDF by selecting File, then Download As. Be sure that you're using the most recent version of this document, which is labeled Cycle 10 and dated January 11th, 2023. This version will have all the appropriate dates and instructions. Bear in mind that the guidelines and template Google Doc is only a working document. You will still need to copy and paste your responses into CLIR's online application system in order to submit a valid proposal. There are two other resources on the Apply for an Award page that we want to highlight. The first is the Digitizing Special Formats Wiki, a project co-hosted by our colleagues in the Digital Library Federation, or DLF. This program may be of particular use, this resource may be of particular use to anyone new to digitization projects and includes links to planning resources, workflow documentation, and even a list of digitization service providers. The second is the technical recommendations for CLIR's Recording at Risk program. This is available under the Key Guidelines, Policies, and References section of our Applicant Resources document library. This was developed with the input of several of the members of our independent review panel. And this document communicates more specific information about reviewer expectations for various aspects of Recordings at Risk project. This will be especially useful to those who may be new to digital reformatting, working with vendors, or thinking about digital sustainability. We continue to add resources and refine this document as needed. Next, we'll take a look at how to begin filling out the application. Once you've confirmed your eligibility as well as your project's alignment to the program, you may be ready to start your application. You'll do this through our online grant management system, SurveyMonkey Apply, or SMO Apply. You can reach by clicking the Apply Here button on the Apply for an Award page. The first step in the application process is registering for an account. Now, if you have applied to any previous Recordings at Risk cycles, beginning with the third call, or to Digitizing Hidden Collections call, or another CLIR fellowship program from 2018 forward, you will be able to log in with the CLIR SML Apply profile you have already set up. You can use the Forgot Your Password prompt if you need a reminder for that information. All others should use the Register Here link at the bottom of the dialog box, circled in red on your screen. For new users, you will receive a message from the SML Apply system that will verify your registration. If you don't receive the message right away, be sure to check your spam and/or junk folders. And if you still cannot find the verification email, contact our team before attempting to register again. Try to avoid creating a new account when you're already set up one. This helps reduce the number of duplicate accounts in the system, which makes it easier for us to assist you. Something to consider as you are setting up your account: the same login information you use to submit your proposal will be how you will log in and access the reporting space should your project be awarded funding. So we recommend documenting the email and password you've used to reduce any confusion in the future. Once you've logged in or created and verified your account, you will see your application dashboard and should be able to start a Recordings at Risk application. Here you can jump to the different tasks of the application, view your progress, and add collaborators to help you prepare your application in the system. There is no need to attempt completing the entire application in one sitting. You can also complete the task in any order you choose. Just be sure to save your work as you go. Most of the application content is contained in the application form task as SML apply. The remaining tasks are all up for uploads. When referencing the guidelines and template, you'll notice cross-referencing to actions that require an upload. This is our attempt to help applicants understand how all of the pieces of the application fit together thematically, even though the online system separates uploads to be added at the end. We've tried to make this as clear as possible in our supporting documents, but if you have any questions or suggestions about how we can make it even better, email us at recordingsatrisk@clir.org. I'm going to turn it back over to Allison.
Next, we'll do an overview of the different components of the application. The application is composed of 9 sections listed here. I'll pause for a moment to remind you that if any questions have come up, or if you think of any as we dive into these sections, feel free to submit them in the Q&A box. And as Sharon noted, all required uploads are added at the end of the process, even though we'll be talking about them as parts of these sections. The first section of the application is the project summary. This is where you provide basic information about the project and your letter or letters of institutional support. This letter should come from a head or administrator within your organization who will be responsible for making decisions about allocating resources for preserving and maintaining access to project deliverables over time. The purpose of this letter is to affirm your organization's dedication to the project and its long-term sustainability. If you are referring to the guidelines and template, you may notice that a little list icon is next to many of the elements in this first section. This indicates that particular information is going to be added to the Hidden Collections Registry. The registry is an open discovery tool that highlights rare and unique collections, including those nominated for Recordings at Risk and Digitizing Hidden Collections. Registry entries are short, just giving basic descriptive information to scholars, professionals, and others looking for information about rare and unique materials. At the end of section 1, and throughout the application form task in SM Apply, you'll be given the choice to click Save and Continue Editing, which will save your work and keep you on the same page, or click Next, which will save your work and move you to the next page within the application. These buttons will navigate you through the entire form so you don't miss any of the 9 sections. Section 2, Description of Content, is where you provide a more thorough description of the source materials to be reformatted. We are looking for information related to their provenance, arrangement, and current accessibility. The application also allows for the upload of an optional inventory. The inventory enables applicants to share with reviewers exactly which recordings will be digitized and supply additional information about the condition, length, or rights status of each recording. We do not have specific format requirements for the inventory, so applicants have the option of providing an edited and annotated copy of pre-existing collection guides or finding aids. We just ask that your inventory make very clear which media you are proposing to digitize through the funds you're requesting in the proposal. Finally, this section requires you to break down the materials by quantity and type. The image at the bottom shows the initial drop-down menu that asks how many different media types are included in your project. For example, if your project would reformat 42 VHS videotapes and also 4 hours of wire recordings, you would need to choose 2 for different media types. Our next slide shows the forms that are generated when 2 categories have been selected. Here you would be able to enter the quantities and types of media you propose to reformat. You could describe your VHS tapes under category 1 and your wire recordings under category 2. The fields under each category include material type, amount, and unit of measurement. Units of measurements may be either items or recorded hours. We ask that you list each category of materials only once. If you would like to include both the numbers of items and number of recorded hours here, you can select one as the official unit of measurement and include the other in the additional information box below. You can also use the additional information box to specify media brand types, since some are more at risk than others, and or other details that may be useful for reviewers, such as how you determined the estimated amount of materials. Section 3 concerns scholarly and public impact. Along with risk of loss, scholarly and public impact are the primary criteria upon which applications to this program are assessed. CLIR instructs reviewers to prioritize projects that include collections that are of high importance to a variety of disciplines and uses, and will have broad national and or international impact on the creation of new knowledge or experiences. This is your opportunity to make a compelling case of the potential impact of your nominated materials. In addition to your own statement in this section, the application also requires that you provide at least 1 and up to 3 letters of support from experts familiar with the collection to help you make your case. The letters cannot come from individuals directly connected to the project, and it is strongly recommended that you get support letters from individuals outside your home institution, and when possible, outside the local region to help demonstrate wider interest. That being said, if there is a local scholar who is really the best person to support your project, then it likely makes sense to ask them for a letter. To help you gather the strongest letters of support, we've created CLIR's guidelines for authors of letters of support, which can be found in the document library of our Apply for an Award page. We encourage you to share this document with all of your letter writers to help guide the process and provide context for the request. Section 4 concerns risk assessment. Here is where urgency of the proposed project is explained. Competitive applications will demonstrate the organization's understanding of these risks, their strategic priorities for mitigating these risks, and how the proposed project advances those priorities. Note that if your materials are in good condition, you aren't necessarily going to be looked at unfavorably by reviewers. Sometimes good condition is a reason why the recording should be preserved now. The review panel considers many factors when evaluating risk, so we encourage you to think beyond the physical condition of your materials. Though things like age and evidence of decay are important, also take note of environmental factors affecting your geographic region, age, or health of the originator of the content, and or access to native speakers of endangered languages. Rarity of the items is also considered, so if you have the only copy of something, that certainly adds to its risk of loss. Sharon will talk about section 5.
Thank you. The rights, ethics, and reuse section helps reviewers assess an applicant's understanding of the legal and ethical issues affecting access to the nominated content and evaluate the proposed approach. We require you to dedicate all metadata to the public domain under a Creative Commons waiver and to avoid imposing additional access restrictions on the reformatted recordings than what may already be in place for the source recordings. While this program does prioritize preservation over access, reviewers strongly prefer that applicants avoid creating unnecessary barriers to access, since such barriers inhibit a project's impact. Access restrictions are allowable when well justified due to legal and/or ethical concerns. Such restrictions will not necessarily disadvantage you in the competition and may even be viewed favorably by the review panel. This includes restricting access to recordings that include personally identifiable information or culturally sensitive material. The project design section describes how the project would work in practice and consists of the components listed here. Design a project plan with timelines that identifies all the major activities taking place during each phase of your project, including the parties responsible and the deliverables. Develop a technical approach that provides information related to preservation, reformatting specs, metadata schema, and so on. Present a thoughtful digital preservation plan which describes the processes and parties responsible for preserving the files created during the project and how preservation activities will be managed over time. Consider the creation of multiple copies of files, scheduled fixity checks, periodic migration of data to new storage media, and any metadata creation that enables these activities. Finally, provide a list of all envisioned project deliverables and how they will be made available to users. You'll also list conditions and terms that limit their availability. All these elements are discussed at greater length in the application guidelines. In this section and throughout the application, be mindful of all page limit requirements. Documents that exceed the page limits will be truncated before being passed along to the reviewers. Section 7 focuses on service provider information. Because the goal of the program is to help institutions without in-house capacity or expertise get started with the preservation reformatting of their audio and audiovisual collections, all recordings at risk applicants must propose projects that name a qualified external service provider who will provide reformatting services. In-house digitization is not allowed, and proposals to reformat recordings at your own institution will disqualify your application. The most frequent question we receive about this is from academic institutions who would like to use on-campus digitization services that may be run through a different department. This would also be considered in-house digitization. In addition to covering this basic information on your selected service provider or providers, you will be asked to submit a rationale for service provider selection. Here you will demonstrate that your chosen service provider or providers that perform technically competent and cost-effective digitization appropriate for the specific materials you are nominating. You may reference the service provider proposal or proposals, but make sure that you clearly explain your decision-making process. Generally, our review panels expect to see more than simply saying, we've worked with this vendor before. Our recipients also encourage all of you to look outside your usual vendors because you may find another service provider more suited to your particular project. We technically only require one service provider proposal, but in most cases, you are strongly encouraged to seek out additional bids and can include up to 3 total. Multiple bids helps demonstrate to reviewers that you have done your research and that the services to be provided are right for your specific materials and your organization's needs. Should your organization prohibit the selection of a service provider until after grant funds are awarded, you must still make a tentative selection for this proposal in order to support the figures included in your project budget. The guidelines and template provide more detail, and CLIR staff is available to answer questions at recordingsatrisk@clir.org. So while we recommend specific qualified service providers, we do have a few tips to help you in this process. Consider reaching out to colleagues for recommendations. Check to see which service providers partnered with organizations on similar grant projects. Explore resources provided by industry organizations like the Association of Moving Image Archivists and the Association for Recorded Sound Collections that often publish lists of digitization service providers who meet their professional standards. Also, the DLF's Digitizing Special Formats Wiki has a list of companies and organizations who have volunteered their information to the page. You will still need to do your homework when it comes to assessing proposals from service providers. Another resources that might be helpful to you is the Effective Outsourcing with Audiovisual Digitization Service Providers webinar, also hosted by our colleagues at DLF and available on the Wiki. We also encourage you to consult our guidelines for grants involving consultants or subcontractors for guidance on bidding, selection, and budgeting. When working with an external service provider, our technical recommendations for CLIR Recordings at Risk program also includes a section on soliciting and evaluating bids. Both documents are available on our applicant resources page. Section 8 is all about funding, which relates directly to the service provider section, since the primary expense for most projects will be the cost of digital reformatting. These are the three budget documents that need to be uploaded. The first is the budget narrative, which has no page limits and serves to explain to the review panel what you are spending and why. An optional budget narrative template is available on the applicant resources page, and you should use the application guidelines to help you build this narrative. You should explain all line items that appear in your budget, discuss how your organization will manage your project, and why you are seeking external funding for this project. The budget detail must be submitted on the budget and financial report form, which is macros-enabled Excel template provided by CLIR. You can hover over any red numbers on the sheet to access additional instructions, as well as review the instructions tab for more detail. The third budget document is the service provider proposal. This is simply a PDF upload of the proposal or proposals that you have selected. Quotes from additional service providers that you did not ultimately select can also be added as appendices. All allowable costs within the request, which includes any costs from your service provider, should be directly related to preservation reformatting of nominated materials and may include costs charged by a service provider related to stabilizing media for the purpose of preservation, reformatting, conducting preservation reformatting, or basic metadata creation, shipping of materials to the service provider, and insurance for materials during shipping and handling by the service provider. In addition to the expenses directly related to the preservation through digital reformatting of at-risk materials, this program allows for some additional yet still connected activities. All such additional costs must be specifically and strongly justified throughout the proposal, and especially in the budget narrative. We have made these adjustments in response to frequent requests to consider allowing requests for these kinds of services and materials. Note in particular that automated captioning, some basic transcription work, and the purchase of digital storage media or rehousing supplies are allowable. At the same time, it is vital to keep in mind that the purpose of the Recordings at Risk program is to support preservation reformatting and not enhance access. To remain competitive, applicants are advised that costs other than vendor-approved digitization services, shipping, and insurance should total no more than 50% of the total request. Reviewers will, at their discretion, decide which applicants might need more additional support of these kinds than others, due to the apparent limitations of an applicant organization's capacity to fund this work through other means. CLIR and its review panel expect to see fair compensation for any labor funded through this program. Conversely, there are a handful of disallowed costs, and I'll just point out a few that are particularly relevant. Indirect costs are disallowed by all CLIR grants programs, and as are any miscellaneous costs. Electronic equipment other than dedicated digital storage media. Software licenses and services are unfortunately something that we can't cover, including digital storage services. Extensive conservation work beyond what is required to get a solid capture of the materials is not covered. Extensive processing and editing of digital audio files post-transfer is also disallowed. The most complete list of allowable and disallowed costs will be found in Appendix A of the guidelines and template document. So be sure to carefully review as you develop your proposal. You can reach out to us via email with any questions you have regarding these items. And I'm going to turn it back over to Allison.
The applicant information section is pretty straightforward. You'll be asked to provide proof of nonprofit status, a board or trustee list unless your organization is a college, university, or federally recognized tribal organization, contact information of the PI, and your institution's address. You will be given the option of submitting proof of nonprofit status one of two ways: by entering your IRS EIN number or by supplying your IRS determination letter or other approved document. Not all EINs will be recognized by the SMApply system, so if it does not work, just plan to upload the appropriate document. And as always, let us know if you have questions or issues. The final component of the application is an optional additional information section where you can upload appendices. Keep in mind that you should use this judiciously and only include additional information that clearly and directly supports your main proposal. Reviewers will prioritize the main application form and required components and will be unlikely to do more than skim additional documents that are especially lengthy or tangential to the proposal. It can be helpful to highlight particular points or details you want reviewers to notice rather than expect them to wade through 100-page finding aids or pages of photographs of very similar looking items. You want these supporting documents to build reviewers' excitement about your project rather than to frustrate or confuse them. Allowable uploads are listed in the guidelines and include summary documentation of collection assessments, accession documentation, donor agreements. This is handy to reference when discussing rights issues. Photographs of the nominated materials to show their physical condition. These are especially helpful to prove the at-riskness of your items. Audiovisual samples relevant to the nominated materials. These can help make the case for scholarly impact. Sample metadata records or even mock-ups of how records will appear to users online. These can help illustrate the technical plan and how access will be provided to deliverables. As mentioned earlier, extra service provider proposals can be added here as well. We're nearing the end of our presentation, so feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box for us to address. We may not have time to address all questions today, so please join us again for our Q&A webinar on March 8th. Which will be dedicated to answering your questions once you have had some time to familiarize yourself with our resources and the application. The link to register can be found on our Apply for an Award page. You are also welcome to email us questions at recordingsatrisk@clir.org. We know that the pandemic and related supply chain issues may still be affecting you. Project planning in the best of times can be challenging, so we wanted to take a moment to make a few specific notes to all of you working on applications right now. One of the most common reflections we hear from recipients is that additional time should be factored into project timelines. The program limits projects to no more than 12 months, so think what that may mean when you consider potential delays in any plans for accessibility to materials. Would a smaller project be more feasible? Could you achieve the same goals through a different or more flexible metadata strategy? Do you have plans in place if you are unable to access your collections for a period of time? Service providers have often been affected by the same closures and delays, so think about how that may translate into your project. Have you asked about any protocols they may now have in place to facilitate remote processing, considerations for shipping delays, lessons they've learned and could pass along to you moving forward? We also do want to note that should your project be funded, the program does have allowances for no-cost extensions and other modifications. Our hope for all funded projects is to see them safely and successfully to completion, and the grants team is here to support you every step of the way. A few broader tips. First, ask yourself, is this program the right fit for my project? It's worth the time spent researching to make sure you're investing time in a program whose criteria and goals align with yours. Second, please read the instructions carefully. Third, leave yourself as much time as possible and plan everything out in advance. Treating this like a project and meeting often to track progress will make for a smooth drafting process. Fourth, assemble a team of people with different expertise to draft expertise to draft different parts of the proposal. Also, our panelists really care that proposals ask for the amount needed to get the project done successfully. Don't just choose the lowest cost vendor because it's the lowest cost. Select the vendor most qualified to do the work to the standards you've established, and then justify your choice. If you need to include staffing for work directly connected to the project, explain to the reviewers why that funding is necessary and how the work is outside the normal scope of work or current institutional capacity. Next, reach out to staff. At CLIR, we're available to answer your specific questions over email at any time. Finally, propose a project you believe in. Your commitment to and excitement about a project definitely come across in your application, and reviewers take note.
Okay, we're going to get into some questions now, and if we run out of time to answer all your questions today, we'll be sure to provide written answers in the Q&A doc that will be posted alongside the recording. And please note that we'll be holding a full hour-long session dedicated to questions and answers on March the 8th. Once again, you can register for that online on our Apply for an Award page. So let's start looking at some of these questions.
Sharon, do you want me to read them to you from the top?
Or you could just pick one that you want to answer and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'll start with the first. Are consultant external vendor costs to support metadata creation to be considered allowable costs? Yes, that can be an allowable cost as long as it is within the boundaries of the percentage of the funding total that you're asking for.
Thank you. Here's the next one. Hi, thanks so much for doing this webinar. We have other funders who use SML Apply and allow applicants to press submit, but continue editing until the deadline. Is that an option here? My suggestion to you would just to save it as you go along, as you're working in the application document. And then you would add those people as collaborators also in the SMLI place. And then only the owner of the application, which would be one person, will be able to hit submit.
And I don't believe that we have ours unlocked for editing after submission, but we can also always open it to you if you reach out to us because you need to change something.
Before the deadline.
We were the recipient of the 8th cycle, and we plan to apply for the 10th cycle as well. The project is going to be the same. Should we provide new references? You mentioned that we can use our previous account to submit our application. Is that correct? Yes, you can use your previous account to submit a new application. You can provide new references, but you're not required to do so. There will be a section in the application for resubmits only where you can comment on how you may have adjusted your proposal based on your previous submission experience and the comments and feedback that you got in the 8th cycle.
This is an interesting question. Do the at-risk materials need to connect by theme, provenance, etc.? Could you envision a successful application that includes materials that does not have any similarities besides being at risk and having scholarly impact, even if that impact isn't related to one type of scholarship? That's an interesting question. So we use an independent outside review panel, and to be competitive, I think it would probably be better for you to make the geographical and or scholarly or humanity-centered basis of the collections to have more wide-based appeal and impact. So my recommendation would be to try to see if you could put a particular collection together that shows. It could be photos by, or it could be recordings of a particular person over a period of time, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you would want to reimagine this in the best competitive proposal possible. Allison, did you want to add to that?
No, I think that's accurate. it's hard for us to say when we can envision a successful application because we do use an independent review panel, but I think any way that you can bring a cohesive theme and add to the compelling nature of your proposal helps to make it more competitive. There's a question about video formats. We don't list every format that's allowable because there are numerous. So this is among the video formats in our collection is Open Reel Video, not audio, but video from an early Portapack. Open Reel Video is not on the RALR list of formats, so I wanted to ask, as long as it is not digitally born and it is time-based, that would be a format that we would accept.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm understanding this next question correctly. I will be a new applicant. Does the event have to be conducted in the April 19th or August 2023? Don't understand how the recordings can be owed. Okay, that's the open application period, if that's what you're asking. The application is open only until April 19th. Between that time and the convening of the review panel and the decisions, we will be doing technical reviews, then we'll be having a review panel to discuss it. So I hope you're not thinking that we're asking for rare recordings that only occurred through those dates. And if you want to clarify your question more, we'll be happy to elaborate.
Some items in my collection need conservation work before they are shipped to an outside vendor. Will RAR pay for the labor to cover these costs? Krista chimed in here, so I'll read what she wrote. She's one of our, she used to be a program officer on this program. Yes, conservation stabilization work is necessary for reformatting to occur is allowable as long as strongly justified within the proposal.
This question looks like, is there also a program to help digitize original photographs in newspapers? So yeah, our Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Unheard Voices is a program that would support the digitization of analog formats, including photos and newspapers. And we hope to have more information on that a little later this year. So if you haven't already signed up for our CLIR News and Grants Team newsletter, please do. And you can find that on our website, and hopefully somebody will drop the link in for that so you can get updates on that program.
There was a question, is indigenous culture and intellectual property covered under the exception for access/discovery? And the answer is yes. That is true under both of our programs. We make the appropriate access and discovery exceptions for materials that cannot just be publicly available.
I'm going to go to the, if our organization is required to seek competitive bids, how can we identify providers in this application? We've actually had this happen in the past, and you can go to the guidelines for the use of vendors and subcontractors for details, but you would have to do a provisional selection. So I would make somebody, or at least so that you can use this for the narrative and the budget details. And then if after that you have to use a different selection, then that can be handled through a grant modification request.
Jumping down to in section 8, what was it that no more than 50% of total was allowed? Basically, we want 50% of the funds to be going towards digitization. So the other stuff that you may need, the pre-conservation work, shipping, supplies, transcription, all of those costs should be less than 50%, and digitization should be at least 50% or more.
And in section 7 about the securing 3 bids, should we include all 3 vendor information details? Do we have to make the determination of the vendor before submitting our proposal? That would fall under the same similar question that was asked earlier about organizations requiring competitive bids. You would hopefully, for the selections of constructing your budget, pick a provisional vendor. And if you need to change your selection at any point after, then you would submit a grant modification request.
Coming down to asking for some clarification on applications from different divisions of the same organization. For example, we are a multidisciplinary org and each division has its own budget. Could more than one division apply? This sounds like a very specific setup that you're discussing. So I would advise you, as Krista has, to contact us directly via email at recordingsatrisk@clir.org to tell us more about what the organization is and how it's structured. And we would be able to answer that question for you with that additional information.
Can former presenters at an organization provide a letter of support? I guess you're referring to possibly recipients. Former recipients may write letters as long as they are not connected with the proposed project.
And there's a follow-up question. Their presentation documentation cannot be part of the materials digitized. That would be a connection to the proposed project. Sharon, I'll answer one more and then we'll wrap up.
Sounds good. Any additional questions? We'll try to answer as many that were on the document as possible, and they will be uploaded hopefully by tomorrow, no later than Friday, on the website. And you can always send us emails at recordingsatrisk@clir.org.
So last one, can a nonprofit cultural memory organization work with a service provider that is an academic institution / library? And the answer to that is yes, so long as they are completely distinct organizations. As long as they are separate from you, then that would not count as in-house digitization. If they're a partner organization and they're affiliated with the project, then you are looking at an instance of in-house digitization, and we would want you to look for an external vendor.
Okay, unfortunately, we're out of time, but we'll try to get to as many of these questions as possible in the next day or two. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you again for our Q&A. And I want to remind you one more time that if you have any further questions, more clarifying, just send us an email to recordingsatrisk@clir.org. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
You can stop the recording.